Good morning, everybody. So great to see everybody in person, and I do hope that this microphone's not going to fall out.
Of your bra.
Exactly. So yes, if it does, please do bear with me. So
no, thanks, John Greenwood. Thanks, Jeremy. Here we are. Great to be here, and great to share a stage with Candice. So over to you. What are we going to talk about, Candice?
So we'd like to share our thoughts with you and observations on the changing risks associated with particularly the contact center environment, and in particular relating to third parties and service provider governance, and to really point out all the things that PCI DSS can really help you with when it comes to managing that risk going forward, our supply chain risk.
Okay, so let's put a frame on it, what we're going to talk about. I can lift stolen cards off the dark web and use them down the telephone all day. When I first did a PCI scope reduction project 10 years ago, we could go into the car park of a large contact center and you could buy card details, addresses for £50, right? Approach an agent, they'd give you a list. Right? 10 years later, you can go and do the same in large contact centers. It'll cost you £5 a go, right? Because it's easy. We don't strip search contact center agents. It's hard enough getting them to turn up to work anyway, right? Particularly post-COVID, traveling into work, right? So it's a really, really awkward situation, how to get the balance right. And really, if you think of our 3 payment acceptance channels, we've done a great job securing face-to-face through chip and pin. We're doing a better job with everything we're doing in e-com. But Moto, we're leaving the door wide open, and that's a massive opportunity that we're missing. It's a massive opportunity we're missing as a community for not closing that back door. But it's also a massive opportunity that regulators are missing. And we've had PSD2 and strong customer authentication working for what we think is the internet to close that channel. But if you read Article 97.1, what you actually read is that I could be stood using a telephone, a remote device, down an insecure channel, right, VoIP, yeah? And I could be using some smart technology that takes my contact center out of scope, punching my card details into my handset, and those card details go straight into a payment gateway. Also, what's the difference with an e-com? Buying something on the internet with a tablet or on mobile. It's the same thing, and the regulators really just not picked that up. And that's a real shame. Because in contact centers all over the world, contact center agents input card details either directly into a website, the back end of a website, because the business uses the website to process their orders, get into the back office, or they input the card data into a virtual terminal that's through an iframe is embedded in some of the desktop software. Right? Now then, those are 2 things that are happening operationally in a contact center. But the other thing that's happening in a big, big way is that contact center software is changing. And it's changing from being individual boxed components that are looking at call routing, separate from, if you like, performance management, separate from workforce optimization. But now those softwares can be delivered down the pipe as a single entity, as a single service. Contact center as a service, right? Or from a comms perspective, unified comms as a service, delivered down the pipe to the call center, just consumed as a service like any SaaS model, right? That's where we are. Candice, give us a bit more on that.
Now, as John's saying, things are really changing, and I think for all of us, the way we've done things as a result of COVID, retail has moved from bricks and mortars to e-commerce environments, and the contact center environment is changing too. And herein lies the risk that John will shortly talk about, is that we used to have everything within our environment, lots of copper cables, boxes, locks behind closed doors that we could put our controls around and really sort of feel assured that we had all the necessary security in place and we weren't reliant so much on third parties. And as we move to the contact center as a service, and then those contact centers rely on fourth and fifth parties to support them in creating operational efficiencies internally and for customer interactions, we start to see the real risks emerging. And also as a result, as John says, the SCA coming in, us closing the front door when it comes to terminals, you know, that's fairly secure. We're battening down the hatches, so shutting the windows with e-commerce. Fraudsters are always going to be looking how the path of least resistance for that one open entry that they can get into. And SCA, or the Payment Services Directive and the Secure Customer Authentication identity checks, they don't apply in the moto space. So what we're going to start seeing additionally is an increase in volumes of fraudsters using stolen cards and wanting to pay over the phone, which is perhaps not necessarily what the contact center has always been there for, and that is to serve customers and deliver excellent customer service. So PCI DSS and everything it has to offer, I think, is going to start to become more and more important and alongside the third-party service provider element. So.
Okay, should we, let's have a look at some of the volumes. I think we've got the volumes next, haven't we? Yeah, we have.
We have.
One of a friend sent me these, and we're able to send you Contact Babel supplied the data. To put some context on this, right? In America and the UK, contact center workers account for about 4% of the working population. Right? That's more than automotive and steel production put together. It's a massive, and it's churning, right? It churns all the time. Staff retention is really difficult in contact centers, right? And then if you look at some of the industries where payments are taken, you could look at retail, and that's the same in Europe, it's the same in America, it's the same in the UK, that some industries like financial services, 100% will take payments off the phone. Right? Look at retail, 100% will take payments off the phone. And if you look globally of how many contact centers are taking payments, you're well up above 60% across all industries, right? And then we have lockdown and everybody says, oh, go home, go home, go and do it at home. And it's a different environment. In America, studies I've done there, a lot of the industry will apply all the standard to all the environment all the time. Well, you can't do that at somebody's front door, right? Oh, sorry. Sorry, neighbor, can't come in. Access control, right? Sorry, Uncle Fred, I know you've just come out of prison, can't come in, right? All that fraudulent stuff you're doing there, can't come in the home, right? It's laughable, isn't it? Crazy when you think about it like that. But we've got masses of payments happening in contact centers that, as an industry, as a community, and as regulators, we're ignoring because you can use stolen cards all day, right? And I think that gives us a really good idea of the scope of the problem we're facing, the size of the door we've left open round the back of the house.
And open doors are, as I just said, you know, very tempting, and it doesn't take long for them to figure out, we're all here, the good guys, but the bad guys, they're multiple, and they're looking for these open doors. And as you can see, the scale of the risk is growing and is set to grow in years to come. And I think it's really important to understand, as John said, the scope of the contact center as a service, and actually that cardholder data is also spoken cardholder data. So call recordings and your third-party service providers are going to be covering an awful lot more and taking a lot of responsibility for data that is also personal data under the General Data Protection Regulation. So the risk is quite large, not only from, and we'll go into it a bit more, from the penalties that could be suffered by a merchant who, through a third party, loses a whole bunch of data, but also from the general data protection authorities or whichever local authority that you're governed by, and they can run into the, telephone style figures, number figures.
Excuse the pun.
The pun. Yeah. So really millions of pounds or dollars, euros of exposure that you need to think about, and also reputational risk that you no longer have total control about as we're moving into the new ways of doing things. Right, so...
it's you again.
It's me again, wow. So let's think about what is a third-party service provider, and maybe what's slightly different now moving into the contact center as a service space. So in the definition within the PCI DSS, the third party is any entity that can materially affect the security of your cardholder data environment. And that is, it's really important to completely understand what access to and what part of your scope the third party is looking after. And particularly around the contact center as a service piece, the role of the telecom provider, the transport layer provider is changing as they're starting to become the link between the contact center as a service provider and delivering unified messaging services and voice recordings. So particularly the bit that's underlined in there is of relevance, and understanding the complexities that, as I say, now we're not behind locked doors anymore, start to enter your scope.
Let's have a look. Jeremy asked me to, I was just going to go to the diagram now.
Yes.
Should we do that? I think that's the next slide. So Jeremy asked me to put together a diagram that described the supply chain, right? And nobody had really done this before. And if I just talk you through this is put, Candice told me, said, do the contract flow. So this is the contract flow. And with the contract flow, of course, you've got the responsibility, the contractual responsibility, right? And what you can see on there is that you've got, first of all, the card brands, the acquirers, and the merchants, right? We're all familiar with that, right? But how does the merchant engage with the technology? Well, it could do it through the technology vendor directly, right? Or it could go through a reseller, right? I'm on the right-hand side of the diagram now, right? Or they could outsource the whole of their contact center sales to a BPO, a contact center outsourcer, right? And that contact center outsourcer, moving across the diagram again, could engage with a technology vendor directly, or they could engage with a value-added reseller, a VAR. Now then, I've seen attestations of compliance, right, from technology vendors, large-scale technology vendors, right? And you have to read them carefully. You have to read them carefully simply because they might wave a flag, we're compliant, but read the text, and it's a little box in California that keeps a few call recordings in. It's not for the service that you're consuming, right? And when you look at the VAR, where's your attestation of compliance? I'm contracting with you. Keep going, right? Just keep asking. Yeah? The back door's open, folks. The back door's really open. And we have to really examine the documentation that we as a community have put in place to really understand how far our back door's left open. Yeah?
And I think, as John said, it's really important to pick up on that word, the contractual obligation. And I don't think everybody is really clear on how the payment ecosystem or contractual flow down works when it comes to the card brands, the acquirers and the merchants, and where the responsibility lays. So I'm a merchant acquirer, Elavon, and we have a contractual obligation with our card brands issuers to ensure that those that use their rails, so our merchants, our customers, are compliant or at least secure and making every endeavour to become secure. I think compliance follows security. And then you, merchants, have contracts with us as acquirers and you are contractually obliged to the acquirer to endeavour to become secure and compliant to the relevant industry standards. And when the contract between the acquirer and the merchant, you're the merchant on record, and we work with you to get that validation, which then in turn requests third parties relied upon. And those third parties are 100% the responsibility of you as the merchant. And I think that's really important to understand, because I deal with a lot of merchants that go, oh, you know, I give it to them, it's nothing to do with me. And that then comes into the next bit that we'll talk about, exactly how to maybe protect yourselves a bit more and fully understand who is supposed to be doing what, and make it very clear in your legal governance. So I think I'm going to move on to the next slide. Has it moved on?
Tick, tick, tick.
Right.
Right.
Yeah. So that legal governance really underpins the supply chain. So the compliance, the chain of compliance that we need to work on together to make sure that we are all protected. So we're all in it together. So when you are exposed, we are exposed, and it ends badly for all of us in one way or another. So what it's really about, and in PCI DSS, there's a very, very fantastic section. I will just drop it in there that prior to being a merchant acquirer, I was head of payment security for BT Group, and I used to look after third-party service provider governance for 80 third parties. And requirement 12 was without a doubt the most important and the most fantastic requirement in there for me, because it really did set out how we could ensure that we were not unduly exposed to the things that that can happen when we're not following the guidelines. So we have 12.6 is really about the education. So obviously it's all around us acquirers, and so please do come and talk to your acquirer, come and talk to me. I don't mind who you're being acquired by, about how you can tackle this particular requirement. Happy to support in any way, shape or form. It's around you being educated, you educating your service providers in turn, and then those third parties educating their subcontracts equally. So it is a really important component. And most importantly, 12.8 and 12.9. So 12.8 sets out having very clear clauses in all your supplier procurement contracts. And I would say that revisiting those as a first port of call, which states that the third party must be PCI compliant, and I would personally suggest that only level 1 or 2 service providers that are listed and recognised as being compliant be your partners, but that they warrant and present a validation, an attestation of compliance that, as John says, covers the scope of the works. And that will lead to an annex, which will be your responsibilities matrix. And it's very clear then who is responsible for which bits, not that you think the third party is doing something when you are actually supposed to be doing that. And 12.9 is the flip side, which obliges your service providers to actually aid you in this endeavour. And I think there's going to be more onus on it in PCI version 4.
Let's go to the last slide, shall we?
Yes, let's do that.
Okay. Did it click? Just the next one? Keep going.
I think that might be it.
Oh, here we go. Right, we thought we'd leave you with this, right? And just to summarize very quickly. We've locked the front door, chip and pin. We're locking the windows. The regulators are helping us. We're locking those big side doors that open up into the garden that is e-commerce, that is digital, the digital economy. But for crying out loud, folks, we need to close the back door, right? Because the tech vendors, the CCAS, the UCAS vendors, even when they're asked, the supply chain, the value-added resellers, they're taking a very, very defensive attitude to the PCI DSS. And when you pick up the attestation, read it. When you look at the responsibilities matrix, read it, because what you're likely to see is shared, 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 which means the door's wide open. It's not even shut. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much.